and welcome to Afternoon Tea with Docs. I'm Dr. Linda, emergency medicine physician from Sheffield, tuning in from Norwich today. And I'm here with my amazing co-host, Dr. Erica, GP from the West Midlands, and we are both lifestyle medicine physicians. If you're new to our show, well, we are here every Sunday at 5 p.m. UK time, bringing you world-renowned experts like our guest today, Dr. Emily Ventura. And we are here to bust medical misinformation and share practical, evidence-based lifestyle advice that you can implement right away to help you prevent, treat, and reverse chronic diseases in a supportive and very lovely community setting. After the interview, if you joined us here on Zoom today, you will be able to speak to us and our guest expert off camera to ask your burning questions and to get to know the supportive ATWD community. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces here joining us today, and so many new faces as well. We love to get to know all of you, so please do use the chat box on the right side and do share where you're tuning in from, and let us know why you have joined us today from your own personal story.
So today we're speaking to Dr. Emily Ventura about sugar-proof strategies to improve our mood. Dr. Emily Ventura is the co-author of Sugarproof and an experienced nutrition educator, public health advocate, writer, and cook. And she has a BA in Biology and Society, Masters in Public Health, and a PhD in Preventive Medicine. She's also got 10 years of research experience in public health with a focus on dietary strategies for the prevention of obesity, diabetes, and cancer. Emily has led public health campaigns for the Jamie Oliver Food Foundation and Slow Food International. Welcome, Emily.
Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor.
It's so lovely to have you. As our guests might have gathered from our previous interview, we are really passionate about the book you have written, Sugarproof, and we would love to get to know a little bit more about what got you to this point in your personal story to write Sugarproof.
Thank you so much for the encouraging feedback about the book. I first got interested in this in 1998 when I was an undergraduate student. I was doing my undergrad in New York, and I came back home to California, where I'm from, for the summer, and I had this internship at a place called the Edible Schoolyard in Berkeley, which is a flagship kitchen and garden program where kids learn to grow their own food in the garden and harvest it and take it into the kitchen. And I just saw the transformative effect that this experience was having on kids that, were not used to eating healthy. I was suddenly so excited about all these fruits and vegetables and simple, healthy foods. And that really inspired me to get into the field professionally. It was just so fun and so rewarding. And it ended up leading me to do some more work as a community nutrition educator and a cook. And I eventually went on to do my graduate work with Dr. Michael Gorin, who later invited me to co-author the book with him.
It does sound like your journey has started much earlier, before the book was, the concept was started, and you had your own personal experience. And I understand that you're a mother as well, so you have been able to practice the advice that you're giving us in the book.
Yes, so I have two boys that are now 6 and 9. And I have to say, I worked as a community nutrition educator for quite a number of years before I had my kids. And, I used to babysit and hang around kids all the time as well. And I thought I understood until I had my own kids. And then I started to realize, wow, actually, this is trickier than I imagined. And some of, just seeing the food products that have come out on the market since I've become a mother too, it just gets increasingly confusing, to be honest. And that's one of the main things that our goal with the book was to try and simplify things, because as a busy mom, you're at the store, you might have your child along with you, they might be screaming, they might already be hungry, you might be hungry, and you just don't have time in that moment to really, to try and educate yourself. So it's great if you have some strategies ahead of time to understand, what's in some of these products, what could I buy instead? And that was another goal with the book.
And although the book focuses on children, does it apply to adults?
Definitely. Yes. And so, one thing I've realized too is that, all of the advice that we give is really, it works across the board for the family. And the more that the whole family can get involved in making just subtle shifts. And then I think one of the other messages that we focus on is just enjoying simple, healthy food. And it sort of naturally displaces a lot of these food products that are so laden with sugar and other unwanted ingredients.
And just before we started, we were talking about the difficulties that we all are facing nowadays to actually get non-packaged, non-processed food that, well, most often we don't know what it contains. And I think it's more than ever, this message is so relevant. We need to learn about the dangers that are hiding behind these packaging and marketing. And as you mentioned, definitely it's for adults, because if our kids don't have the right example, then we cannot expect them to eat healthy.
It's so true. Yeah, 70% of all food products and 80% of snacks marketed to children contain added sugar. So it's really like the more packaged food you buy, naturally, probably the more sugar that you'll be eating. And then that also comes with a whole host of other ingredients that you probably don't want to have a lot of in your diet, as well, like industrial seed oils and, different types of food dyes and other things as well. So learning really simple ways to just, make things or buy things that are less processed has a big positive effect on your diet and how you feel.
And you highlighted in the book that there are quite a lot of food deserts, especially in America, and now I believe more and more in Europe as well, where you cannot buy fresh fruit. And I would love to invite our guests to have an open eye and start looking at what is presented to us in stores, in gas stations, where you can buy snacks. How often can you actually buy something that's fresh and it's not packaged up with hidden additives? I would love you to comment here in the chat below. Is it easy in your area to actually buy something that is actually presented as nature intended it to be? In the book, Emily, you highlighted a very important question. Do you know what your children are like without sugar? And I guess this extends to adults too. Can you explain how sugar affects our mood?
Yes, I love that you pulled that out because, it's so true. I think we're all so used to a baseline, a lot of us are used to a certain baseline, amount of sugar in our diets. And oftentimes parents don't really realize how these daily choices are impacting their children in terms of their temperament and their attention span, and their energy levels, really. So we have a challenge in the book where we have two different challenges. One is a 7-day challenge where you go for 7 days with no added sugar, and the other one is a 28-day challenge where you just gradually reduce the amount of sugar that you have in your diet. It's amazing the feedback we've gotten. Some people say, wow, I had no idea, that my child's moodiness was being caused, at least partially by the sugar that I was accidentally drip feeding her throughout the day. So this one mom that we talk about in the book was giving her daughter things like toaster waffles with syrup for breakfast, or these yogurt kind of drinks that have probiotics in them, but they're actually really sweet. So she was having one of those mid-morning, and maybe a sandwich with some toast with some jam a little bit later, maybe a granola bar. And her daughter was very moody and irritable and throw these horrible tantrums. And it wasn't until she did one of our challenges that she realized, wow, actually that was a cause. And sometimes as parents, I think we don't really realize some of the impacts of what our children are eating on the way that they're feeling and behaving, because we don't always see it. So, a perfect example is a lot of, as parents, we feed our kids breakfast and then they go off to school and we don't see what, how they are at 9, 10 a.m. on a weekday. So another story that we talk about in the book was, this common thing where this, preteen, she's very smart, going to school, eating her breakfast, going to school. and then nearly falling asleep in second period. Around 9 o'clock, she's putting her head down on the table, and her teacher ended up sending an email to the parents and saying, I'm just not sure what's going on with Grace. She can't stay awake in my class, and she's so smart and she can absolutely grasp this material, but why is she so tired? And so her parents thought, well, maybe she's staying up too late, maybe we're letting her be on her phone too long, maybe we should try and take away the phone at 7:30 p.m. and shift her bedtime to 9. Well, none of that was working. And then coincidentally, they did our challenge with us, and then they realized, oh, actually Grace's breakfast was full of sugar. So she was having honey nut flavored Cheerios in the morning with milk, but also with a glass of like an orange peach mango 100% juice. And then she was having her 2 vitamins. One was a chewy multivitamin, and the other one was a calcium chew. And sometimes she was having 2 bowls of the cereal. So she was having a really, really high sugar breakfast. And then, and then crashing and not feeling well. And so once they shifted Grace's breakfast, they saw that she was feeling better. She had more energy. So, it is really amazing how the simple choices that you make for what you're, bringing into your own home and allowing your child to have as staples can make a huge difference in how they feel.
Yeah, and these cereals in the morning that are highly processed and they are marketed as whole grain because they write on it. We just saw that in England, you don't have to have more than 6% of the whole grain to have in the cereal to market as a whole grain brand. And this repeats itself in many, many packaged foods, unfortunately, can be very misleading for busy parents, unfortunately. They are thinking that they are doing well for their kids by buying these very palatable but rather sweet cereals for breakfast. And of course, kids love it. So when it's difficult to get them to eat something and they just say, well, I just want that, it's very, very easy to then just reach for it. Such examples as this, and in the book you highlighted that during birthday parties, on holidays, people are eating a lot of sweets, which are really difficult to get around due to shortage of time. Do you have any suggestions on what our parents could do in these situations that are easy?
Definitely. Would you like to start like on different occasions? Maybe start with breakfast and then we can move to the birthday parties or snacks.
Yeah, so let's do the breakfast right now, as we just mentioned.
Great. Yeah, so cereal is so convenient, and I understand. I have it in my house. I try not to have my kids eat it that regularly because I don't think it's the best choice. They tend to be hungry soon after they eat cereal. But it is really handy to have in your home. And so if you do want to have cereal, just try and choose one that is genuinely low in sugar. We suggest under 3 grams. So, the ones that I tend to have in my house are plain bite-sized shredded wheat, cornflakes that are just basic cornflakes, and sometimes I'll get the low sugar Cheerios, and my kids, did I say grape nuts? My kids like grape nuts, which is really confusing. There's no grapes in them. It's it's made from like a malted wheat, but they have no added sugar. And so, if you're going to have cereal, try and choose one like that that's objectively whole grain and low in sugar, and then try and pair it with something that has some fat and protein in it. So my favorite would be to have it with like Greek yogurt or plain coconut milk yogurt, or even full fat milk of some sort. Certainly try and avoid the sweetened. I know plant-based milks are very popular. Just try and not choose like a vanilla flavored one that has sugar in it. And then if you can add even more fiber or protein to it by sprinkling on some flax seeds or some chia seeds or some chopped nuts, or add extra nutrients with some berries, those are great additions. So you can certainly, Michael has a really fun video on our Instagram page of him doctoring up a bowl of Cheerios himself. So that, that's something that you can do. I try and have my kids have something that's really high protein in the morning. So I will try to have them have one of our recipes, like the spinach and the Popeye eggs. So eggs with spinach and a piece of whole grain toast if they want it. Or if we're really in a hurry, sometimes just a piece of whole grain toast with peanut butter or almond butter will work. We have recipes in the book, like things like overnight chia pudding or overnight steel cut oats, which in the UK are called pinhead oats. So those are porridge oats that are less processed, and they have a lower glycemic index than rolled oats. And so they provide more steady energy. The whole idea is to keep your child's energy levels more steady and not have them board what we call the sugar roller coaster first thing in the morning. Because if they do have a sweet breakfast, they're more likely to have, big spike in blood sugar followed by an insulin response to compensate for that. And then that ends up causing a blood sugar crash and more cravings for sugar. And that cycle can just continue. They'll probably first feel it mid-morning at school, and then it'll end up, shaping their food choices throughout the day. So yeah, the more you can do to stabilize your child's blood sugar first thing in the morning, the better.
And you did mention about the sugar spikes, and unfortunately, the difference between having a healthy, non-sugary breakfast and what you just mentioned, a good example in our children and also in busy adults as well, can be a huge emotional roller coaster and crashing energy, as you mentioned, tiredness, lethargy. Why is there such a strong association between sweet things and our different emotional states?
Well, it can cause you to be just irritable when your blood sugar is out of whack. It's like when you start to feel hungry, and sometimes kids don't even realize what's going on, and adults don't always either, don't realize that actually why they feel irritable and impatient and why they can't concentrate is because their blood sugar levels are not steady. They're having these rises and crashes, and it can cause just general sort of anxiety and irritability. Also, a lot of these foods with a lot of sugar are inflammatory, and so you might be experiencing the effects of sort of an inflammatory response in the body from having all this sugar. There's certainly ecological studies that show that a high sugar diet is correlated with anxiety, depression, even things like schizophrenia. There's some evidence to show that like a Western style diet, which includes sugar but also other processed foods, has even been linked to incidence of ADHD. So I think, I don't think we may not know all the mechanisms, but certainly we do know that your food does affect your mood. And so the more that you can do to reduce the sugar and then, add in healthier things like protein, high quality fat, omega-3 fatty acids, a wide variety of plant foods that contribute fiber, but also all these phytonutrients will in general create a lower, that is a lower inflammatory way of eating, and also promotes your gut health. And we know that your gut health is very linked to your brain health, because the gut's now called the second brain. So there's a lot of signaling that's happening from your gut to your brain. And so the more that you can do to promote healthy gut bacteria, the more that will actually impact, your overall mood, and also reduce inflammation in your body.
And if a mother or a father would like to kind of look into if their kids or even if themselves are eating too much sugar, due to which their mood is up and down, what would you advise? How do they start to measure their sugar intake?
Well, I think the first question to ask is, what are you drinking? because we know that sugar sweetened beverages are really like the easiest way to rack up a lot of sugar in your diet. And they can have the most detrimental effects because it's delivering a huge dose of sugar in a short amount of time. And, you know, a lot of these studies that sort of break down, well, you know, what are these sugary foods that are, you know, correlated with these negative effects? Oftentimes they're actually isolating the sugar sweetened beverages as the culprit. You know, just looking, you know, are your children drinking fruit juice? And if so, can you start to water that down? You know, as you spoke with Michael in the episode that you did with him, fructose specifically is damaging to the body, to growing bodies in particular. So, you know, taking out the fruit juice or just starting to water it down, looking at, you know, are there fizzy drinks in your home? Are your kids drinking sports drinks when they, you know, go to a sports practice? Are you letting your kids go to Starbucks after school if they're old enough? Are they spending their money on these huge frappuccinos? Those are good places to start. And then breakfast is another big one. So making subtle shifts in what's going on with breakfast can make a huge, huge impact. Because, you know, as we know, like one serving of a sweeter cereal can easily have 12 grams of sugar, which is 3 teaspoons, which, you know, might not seem a lot, but actually, if you look at our sugar-proof recommendations in the book for sugar by age and gender, that's actually the max recommendation that we're suggesting for a child, say of like 3 or 4 years old. And that, you know, that's just one serving of cereal at breakfast alone. So if you can swap out that cereal, you can make a huge difference.
Yes, when we did the last episode, we discussed the dangers of fructose, which really is shocking, even to doctors who don't know much about sugar, fructose, and their side effects. We are seeing a huge rise in liver transplants in children because of non-alcoholic liver disease that is fueled by this high rise of fructose intake from juices, from processed foods that are hidden everywhere. I thought that was really shocking to read in the book. And it's so important that you guys have highlighted that so clearly. And that's why we're so passionate about sharing your message. It's very easy to understand, to read the book, and you have so many practical aspects in there, even the form where you can go by and check how much sugar you're taking in. It's very easy, you know, very practical, and it's all about understanding the dangers, and then you can tweak it to what is healthy for your child. And yeah, it's fantastic, very practical book. Wanted to just ask you, as we are in mental health and trying to understand better how emotions are driven by it, when we are at birthday parties, they are very, very common, frequent occurrence in children's lives, and it can be tricky to navigate how to sugar-proof both the hosting and attending parties. In such a tricky situation, what would be your tips to give to mothers and kids?
Well, so my one son just went to one on Friday. And, you know, you never know exactly what's going to be served at the party. I've been to enough of these that I sort of have an idea of what might be there and what might come home as the treat. This particular one started at 6:30 at night, which, you know, is a little bit later than we're used to. It went from 6:30 to 8:30. So I wasn't really sure, you know, is there going to be a dinner involved, or, you know, what are there crisps or snacks or only sweets? And so I ended up, my top strategy is to feed my kids something healthy before they go, so that they're not really hungry. And so my son had fish, you know, with the rest of the family. We ate at 5, which is, you know, pretty typical for us these days anyway. I realize that's not always possible for your family. So, you know, if you can't feed a full dinner, make sure your child has some form of a healthy snack so they're not arriving at that party hungry. Because also, this one was at like an indoor play center. So my son was going to expend a ton of energy at that party. And had he not eaten before he went and then played and then was presented with a huge buffet of cupcakes and sweets and crisps and squash and stuff, he probably would be more likely to, to have some of everything. So he had dinner before he went, which was good. And then actually there wasn't food served. There was squash or water. And my kids sort of know that, especially at a birthday party, if they're, I sort of get them in the mindset of like, you can choose something sweet to have, try not to choose all of them at once, so squash falls into the sweet category. So if you're going to have the squash, then, maybe would you rather have squash or cake? Most kids would probably choose the cake. So my kids always know, by default, they're going to pick the water, and they're used to drinking water anyway. So, that's a pretty easy one. But if you can help your kids to maybe not have the sweet drinks, because the sweet drink combined with the sweets with the cake, and there might also be sweets coming home like the, Haribos or whatever else. So he had water to drink. And then when we were out the door, they were offering cake and they were offering sweets. And, I sort of asked my son, what would you like to have? And so he took home 2 sweets, and they're still here at the house. So he hasn't had those yet. But, I don't want to take away that experience of having the sweets. So it so happened that my parents are in town and they had already given him something sweet earlier in the day. So he's sort of used to the idea of, well, I've already had something sweet today, so I don't need these sweets today. I'll have them another day. So I think, the idea here is to not make your children feel restricted. Certainly there's going to be times where they do go to the party and they try some of everything, and you don't want to make them feel bad about that for overdoing it on one particular birthday party. We're not here to say, oh, police your children or restrict your children. I think it's actually kind of important for them to have that experience sometime of saying, wow, I really overdid it. I don't feel too well. I had the cookies, I had the cake, I had the gummies and the squash, and now I feel horrible. And, that's a moment where you can talk with them and say, well, okay, it's all right. No problem. What do you think you could do next time so that you don't feel this way after? And then they sort of start to self-regulate, and you give them agency so that they can end up making their own choices, and you're sort of there to just talk with them and help brainstorm, but you're not there as the as the police.
It's really good to kind of give them that authority to be with the educations that you're giving them through life. They're being empowered to say no because they understand the reasons, instead of just because mom said so. It must be very hard. It's almost impossible for kids to rationalize that. But if they feel proud of their decision because they understand the reasoning behind it, I find that a much easier approach. And when kids go into their teenage years and early adolescence, there's quite a lot of mood shift. There's a lot of anxiety, even depression. Some become quite aloof. And that's that period, I think, when we really have to ask the question, is this really just because of the hormonal changes? Or is it because of what they are eating? Is that a problem, do you think, you see in overall?
Yes, definitely. Developmentally, I mean, they're already prone, like you said, to impulsiveness and to moodiness and to some of these, accelerated stress response because of the way that their brain is developing. So you add sugar into the mix, or you add something like an energy drink that not only has sugar but also caffeine. It really, exacerbates the existing situation, which is just normal. It's part of, their physiology. So yeah, and then in teenagers, it's harder because, they're out of the house, they're doing their own thing, they have their own money, they're making their own choices. So I think, just, being sure that there's healthy stuff in your house, so that it's easy for them to find something good, and, modeling some of the things, the way that you eat definitely helps, but also giving them the choice, letting them pick out some healthy recipes and foods that they want to try rather than imposing it. And that's a strategy actually that works with, most ages, is just getting them involved so they don't feel like this is being imposed on them, but this is more something enjoyable that they're participating in.
So there's certainly always a question to be asked, nevertheless, before we are going to the big guns of drugs, because you did mention about possible ADHD link and other more serious mental health problems. We must ask what is in their diet. And thank you very much. I'm going to hand over the interview to Dr. Erica now.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Linda. So we've talked about different kind of aspects of sugar proofing. You talked about breakfast and birthday parties. And I wondered if you could kind of talk us through how to actually get children involved. And in the book, you talked about the acronym RULE. So I just want to kind of talk about each component a little bit. So RULE stands for roll with resistance, understand your child's own motivation, listen with empathy, and empower your child. So let's start with roll with resistance. How do you deal with children, especially teenagers, feeling judged, or younger children not willing to give up their sweet treats and things like that?
So this, I love that you brought this up, because I just love this topic. It's, and this comes from a psychological training approach that a lot of therapists use with counselors and therapists use with patients. It's called motivational interviewing. So the whole idea is that you're sort of coming alongside by asking open questions. And so you're helping, your client, and in this case, your child, or, whichever, children are in your life, to explore what's going on with them. So just open-ended questions to help them explore and hopefully move more toward their own motivations for eating healthy. So rolling with resistance, you might say, hey, the resistance might come along like, hey, here's this new breakfast cereal. You might get the, nope, want nothing to do with it. So you might just have to say, well, okay. Just letting that be, and then, maybe coming back to it another time, or just asking an open-ended question is like, oh, what is it about it that, that doesn't look good to you, or, what might you like to have instead? Just sort of not coming down on them and, overreacting to when they put up a wall. So that what you're really trying to do is avoid any type of a power struggle there, and you're just trying to keep the dialogue open.
Yeah, absolutely. We do that in, as doctors, we do motivational interviewing as well. And we talk about kind of avoiding that writing reflex of kind of correcting them all the time, and kind of, just basically rolling with resistance, because I think doctors are really bad at just saying, but this, or kind of telling people what to do quite a lot, rather than asking for their own kind of opinion, and listening to their motivation. So the second part of RULE is understanding the child's motivation, and you talked about the readiness ruler. So can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So, going back to that breakfast cereal, maybe, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you be willing to try a different breakfast cereal than the one you usually have? And you might get a 2. They might really not want to try the breakfast cereal, and you might just say, well, okay, no problem. And you could just entirely drop that and just, focus on something else, or come back to it another day. Or you could say something along the lines of, okay, well, what might it take to get you to a 3? Is there anything, like, if we went, menu of options, so could we possibly go shopping together? Or is there something you might like to put on top of it that might make it more interesting to you? Or, even better, I guess, is just not not direct, less directive. So the more you can get from them, the better, because if they came up with the idea, they're more likely to do it. And if you're really stuck, you can help them come up with a menu of options. But in general, it's better if they came up with the solution.
So if they're just not ready to change and they're very resistant to it, what would be, I guess it depends on the individual scenario.
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
Well, it's so dependent on the exact situation. So I was just working with someone the other day that has a child who's used to eating a white chocolate granola bar every morning for breakfast, and he's just completely unwilling to shift. And this particular parent feels like, well, if I don't buy these granola bars, then my child isn't going to eat breakfast. So as the nutrition educator, what I might want to say is, well, just don't buy the granola bars. But that's not going to work in her. She feels that wouldn't work, and she doesn't want to put her child through the shock of that. So okay, so what can we do with that, the fact that this particular child is really hooked on these granola bars? So, we talked about, well, combining maybe the granola bar with something else that would offset the overall glycemic effect of the granola bar. So she mentioned that her son really likes to eat spoonfuls of peanut butter. So what we end up saying as a start is, well, sometimes he'll be so hungry after eating the granola bar that he'll have a spoonful of peanut butter later. And so I said, well, what if you, said, well, what if we started out with this spoonful of peanut butter and then had the granola bar? So, that's a way to sort of offset the glucose, spike that's going to come with that granola bar if you have the peanut butter first. And it's sort of a way of like getting around the fact that, the granola bar is not probably the best choice, but that's going to be that way for now. And then, we talked about different ideas. Well, then maybe we could say half of the granola bar, the peanut butter, and then, add another, add some plain yogurt, or add, a piece of fruit, or add an egg eventually. Sometimes these changes need to happen really slowly. And, you don't want to necessarily take away from your child something that they are really attached to, but you can work on sort of, adding in other things and, gradually expanding their horizons and, seeing what they might be willing to try to compromise on.
Yeah, so you just talked about the glycemic index, and with the glycemic index, the higher it is, the quicker the glucose is released into the bloodstream, the quicker the food is to cause a blood sugar spike. And why the peanut butter works in slowing down is because peanut butter is quite fatty, and the fat in the peanut butter slows down the release of the sugar, and therefore the overall glycemic index of this meal becomes lower, although the individual food, the granola bars, glycemic index remains what it is, but we've kind of slowed down that sugar spike. And talking about kind of understanding the child's motivation, I mean, how would you start that conversation? It doesn't seem like a very kind of natural or common conversation to have with a child. Yeah.
It's true. I think, if you can, link it back maybe to when your child maybe ate a whole bunch of sugar and didn't feel well, or maybe ate, well and felt great and had a good day, or, if there's something that your child is really into, like a particular sports activity, you could talk about how, eating a really good breakfast or snack or whatever it is before football practice will help him or her, run faster, feel better, have more energy. Just linking it in some way to one of their hobbies, or even just the pure enjoyment of the food, like having them pick out something at the store that they might want to try, like a new fruit or vegetable, or pick out a new recipe that looks exciting to them. So they might be motivated because they picked it out. And motivated eventually. If they help prepare it, then there's a certain sort of pride that comes with the fact, well, I helped make this soup, or I helped make this meal, or these energy bites, or whatever. Sometimes the motivation can just be their own involvement with the process.
And it's important here as well to not tell them what their motivation might be, right?
Yeah.
So really ask and listen. And actually, you talk about getting them involved, getting them shopping, getting them involved in preparing the food. And Linda's actually got, a good story about that when she led her community, took them shopping, and the kids were very excited to get involved. And yeah, Linda, do you want to share?
Yeah, that's a great example. And I don't have kids myself. So it was wonderful to see that once we got the community together, the moms and the children, as soon as they saw our behavior of, hiking together, shopping together, and showing them what would be a fun way to cook and shop. What happened actually is one of the little girls decided, she was maybe just 12 years old, and she decided to take her mom shopping with her. She will teach her how to shop well. She learned our advice and she really loved being engaged. And she literally took her mom shopping and showed her around on the aisles that were healthier. And she eliminated her own sugar. This was fascinating and lovely to see. And she took photos of the shops initially. She actually recognized that it was a little bit more sugary and it had less of the whole foods. She actually recognized it, wrote it on a Facebook. And the next shop, she's like, I did better this week. It was just wonderful to see. And then she continued to improve her shops as we were kind of chatting about it on the community platform. It was wonderful.
Wow, I love to hear that.
It's just warm, isn't it? So heartwarming. And kids, I don't think we give them enough credit, really, because I think they are leading the way if we allow them to do so with a lot of pride and often with much more creativity than what we are able to muster up with our adult and less exciting ways of thinking.
Yes, it's true. And also something I want to mention in this too is that you really do need to, be patient and realize that not all of these things are going to have an immediate effect. So, if you take your child shopping, he or she picks out a new vegetable, you bring it home, they may or may not help prepare it, they may or may not eat it that time, and that's completely fine. Because all of this is just sort of building a positive food experience, and you can't expect sometimes all those things, three things are going to happen, shopping, cooking, eating in one swoop, and it's all going to go positively. Sometimes only one aspect will go as you expected, and that's fine. Kids are really unpredictable. One day, especially when they're in their younger phases, one day they're loving courgettes, the next day they want nothing to do with them. We don't always know why. So yeah. So I think, that also ties back into what we were talking about with the RULE acronyms, just sort of rolling with what happens and, just trying to stay positive and, focus on your own enjoyment of healthy food, I think has a huge impact on the food culture of your family and the food environment in your home.
And knowing that we all start at a different starting point, right? So as you mentioned with the example of the granola bar, the kid's not going to stop eating the granola bar suddenly. So we take small steps to try and lower their glycemic index of the meal, and then slowly reduce the amount of the granola bar they're having. And same with, fruit juices. And I love actually in the book, you talked about how to dilute drinks and how to reduce this sugar content. And actually the thing that the other liquid to dilute the drinks with is quite important as well, isn't it? Can you kind of enlighten us on that?
Sure. So, I think if you've ever tried a fizzy drink that went flat, it tastes awful. And you're much more aware of all the sugar in it, and it just tastes terrible. So if a drink that you're trying to dilute is already fizzy, then consider adding something else fizzy, a plain fizzy like soda water or club soda, with no sugar to it, rather than regular water. Some, also fizzy drinks can be a nice way to, fizzy, like non-sweetened fizzy drinks like the club soda and the sparkling water can also be a nice thing to use for fruit juices, because you can almost make like a fizzy drink of your own by just putting a splash of the juice into club soda or sparkling water. And then, gradually working up to just having, maybe your kids might like plain sparkling water. We've got a Soda Stream machine in our house. It has a glass canister, and you just you pump the carbonation into the water, and it's less plastic waste. And my kids now are happy to just drink that. They like it, but not all kids like that taste initially. But if they come into it gradually, they're more likely to accept it. If it's a drink like a hot chocolate or something milk-based, then you can just add plain milk to it to keep that like milky flavor, but reduce the sugar. So, if you're used to making your kids hot chocolate or some sort of a breakfast drink with a powder, you can just add less powder, or if it's already pre-mixed, add a splash of plain milk. At Starbucks, you can ask to have them put less pumps of the sugar if you're having a Frappuccino. So that's something that teens may want to know. We have, if you have teens and you want to show them our Instagram, we have pictures, and certainly online, it's just easy to show pictures of how much sugar is actually in these things. And we have an activity in the book of measuring sugar, where kids can take their favorite drink and you can help them look at the grams of sugar on the nutrition label and divide that by 4 to get teaspoons, and then actually have them measure out the sugar, and seeing that tangibly, right? Seeing that there's like 20 teaspoons of sugar in this venti Frappuccino that has 80 some grams of sugar is shocking, for most people. Can't imagine actually drinking that. So it can be really a helpful activity.
Cool. And the third part of the acronym is listen with empathy. And it sounds simple enough, but can you give us some tips to help us or help the children or the teenagers know that we are hearing them?
Definitely. So, I think it's just coming into your child's reality, whatever it is. Maybe they, felt left out on a particular occasion because what was in their lunch, didn't seem as exciting as what was in their friend's lunch, who was allowed a Nutella sandwich and a flavored yogurt and a candy bar all at once. And then, just trying to understand what their reality is, what might be bothering them, what they're, and through that you can kind of come to their needs. But I think just, maybe not trying to fix it, just listening to understand what's going on with them. And this could be a hypothetical concern too. Maybe they're concerned, if you were to change this, then I would feel this way. And so, and that might end up shaping sort of the solutions that you come to together as a family, but just understanding what's going into it for them, I think is important.
Okay. And the last part is to empower your children. I know we're talking about children here, but actually this applies to adults as well, and applies to ourselves when we're having these conversations, internal conversations with ourselves about making more healthful choices. So in terms of empowering, and you gave really good examples of you with your children, so that they know that, they can have that one sweet thing, they can make the choice as to what that might be, whether it's the cake or the squash, or if they've already had one sweet thing earlier on from grandparents, that they don't need those, sweets later on in the day. And, you talked about in the book to activate the upstander in the children. Can you expand on that?
Yes, that's where I was going to go with my response. So I love that you brought that up. So, just kids, nobody likes to be fooled, right? Nobody. So as your kid gets older, you can sort of bring them in on these tricky marketing schemes, by pointing out, well, look, this box says whole grains, this box says high vitamins, this box says full of calcium and, high fiber and high protein, but let's take a look at what's in it, what's really in it. And so, going through the food label with them and saying, well, what else do you see on here? Oh, wait, we realize that sugar is actually the second ingredient. That's not mentioned on the front of the box, or, just pointing out, oh, they put these characters on. Did you notice they put your characters on this box? Or, even little things like pointing out to kids that the sweeter foods are put at their eye level in the grocery store. And then they start to, my kids think, oh, wow, well, I'm going to outsmart that. I'm not going to be fooled by that. I'm not going to want this, Spider-Man cereal just because it has Spider-Man on it when, actually I've got a Spider-Man costume, I've got Spider-Man stickers, I've got Spider-Man pencils. Who needs that cereal? So I think just bringing them in on the choices and helping them to realize, unfortunately, that there's tricky food companies out there that are really good at selling these foods to kids.
And I guess one important thing when we have these conversations with children, it's important to still kind of support them in maintaining a healthy relationship with food, that they're not then feeling like they're being judged or starting to have, huge concerns about, food and weight and these sort of issues. How would you navigate that with children, especially teenagers?
It's so important. And certainly, we always try and remind, people through our book and through our messaging that we're not saying that you need to take out all sugar, and that some sugar is fine, for you. And it's really about finding more of a balance with it. And, certainly you don't want to put any foods on a pedestal. So even if something is absolutely not good for your child, but they really, really want to try it, like perfect example is like the candy floss at a fair. My kids were fascinated by that. They were curious what it was. And I just thought, well, we gotta address this sometime, right? Like this one, either I'm gonna prohibit it and it's gonna be on this pedestal, and on the pedestal every year the fair comes around. So, at a certain point, this was a while ago, I can't remember if I bought it or someone else bought it and I asked if we could try it. I certainly didn't buy my children each one of them, but I just thought, well, okay, let's let them try this. And they tried it and they're like, oh, it's just plain sugar, Mom. Yep, it's just plain sugar. Oh, okay. So now we've moved on. So now when we go to the carnival, they don't ask about the candy floss. So, I think you never want to, demonize anything. Let your kids be kids, let them explore things curiously, certainly educate them as it goes. And when they're really little, I think before they realize, what these different things are, you can have a big impact by just choosing, healthy things to have in your home and not exposing, not start giving them these overly sweetened products at a young age before they actually are, asking for them.
And for those people who are, used to quite a lot of sugar and have a very, a palate that is very used to sugary foods, when they start to reduce their sugar intake, they might experience some withdrawal symptoms. Could you kind of talk about them and let us know what to watch out for?
Sure.
And what's kind of like normal to to maybe expect?
Yes. So, the cravings that come along, with when you're trying to reduce sugar, oftentimes there's cravings, headaches, irritability, moodiness. And so, those are normal. So, if you're really concerned about that, you could try a gradual approach instead of, an approach. I think you probably know best, yourself and your children. So, if it seems too harsh to do the 7-day kind of approach where you take it all out, then maybe try the gradual approach if you're, worried about that. If you're doing more of the like cold turkey approach and your kids have headaches, or moody or cranky, just knowing in advance and telling them in advance that they're going to experience that is helpful. Certainly things like drinking more water, having some alternative snacks and treats available, some fruit or one of our treats from the book that, is naturally sweetened can help. We specifically made all of our recipes. We challenged ourselves to make all of our recipes without any added sugar so that they could work for people doing the challenge as well. So a lot of people have, come to love things like our chocolate sesame squares, which are, they don't have any added sugar in them, but they're quite sweet. They're still, a treat. And so in it, that can sort of end up leading toward developing like new habits and new things to turn to when you're craving something sweet.
And talking about treats, we often use sweet things as a treat, as a consolation, or even as a way to show love to people that we care about. And it can be quite tricky to how would you approach these kind of situations?
Erica, I love that you brought this up because it's one of my pet peeves personally when parents and in a setting we always say you can have a treat, and it's also I can have a treat because I have eaten well the whole week. And I really do question and in my head, but often I would like to ask out loud, is it really a treat when it actually harms you, both in your mental health and your physical health? It's so important that we start changing the conversation and how we use this terminology, a treat. Shouldn't a treat be something that makes you feel better and makes you live longer? But I do understand that, of course, it is a very powerful enjoyment that you get from the burst of sugar, which is, we know very well, that is actually more addictive than cocaine when we look at my studies. But still, should we change the way how we use this word, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it can be tricky, right? And I think, it's a natural thing when we're feeling sad or, the whole emotional eating thing, you're stressed, you're sad, you're more likely to reach for something sweet also when you're tired. And so just sort of bringing an awareness into that. And also, as a parent, realizing that if you're stressed or your child's sad or stressed, giving them that ice cream may temporarily make them feel better, console them, but actually they'll feel worse shortly after they've had that. And that certainly isn't to say that you can't give, don't feel like you can't give your child an ice cream sometimes. That's completely fine. But if you find that you're, regularly using that as a way to cheer them up or reward them, then that's when you can start, sort of thinking about, okay, well, what are some other things that we could do? Could we put on one of their favorite songs and, sing along to it? Or could we take a walk around the block when we're stressed or sad and just clear the air? And, or could we, I don't know, if you want to
give them a hug or a kiss.
Yeah, give them a hug or a kiss or
physical affection.
Exactly. Yeah, or if it's reward for good grades at school, maybe picking out a book at the bookstore or going on a little outing bike ride together. It really depends on what you're trying to replace. But I think just certainly raising awareness of it is good. And sometimes as parents, we're doing that ourselves. We've had a really busy day. We're really tired. What do we do as soon as the kids go to bed? Oh, maybe I need something sweet, or I'm stressed. And when we model that kind of behavior for our children, they start to pick up on it too. So.
Yes, and it's dangerous also to create these habits. So whilst it is not a perfect world that we live in, as you mentioned, it's just very good to ask ourselves, are we doing the right thing here? And maybe tweaking it as we go along.
Right.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this incredible hour. And before we move on to the second half of our event, the non-recorded cozy group chat, for those who have joined us here on Zoom, we have mentioned quite a lot of practical aspects, but I would love to pick out those three actionable and practical takeaways that you think our listeners can implement right away to kind of turn their sugar habits around.
That's great. I think at first, let me just say that hour flew really fast.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. And I mean, your book is just so full of information, like literally scenarios of what to do if the kid's crying in the supermarket, how to console them, and what to do if people keep bringing around sugary treats. How to approach these conversations, tips on making changes in the kitchen, around your home, and even talking about food containers, which was those sort of things. So if you are interested, we definitely recommend this book. It's just full of great information.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I cut in there.
Yeah, no problem. And I should get to those 3 tips. So my 3 top tips are: number 1, create a positive food environment in your home by showing your own enthusiasm as a start for healthy foods and simple meals that are made with, simple seasonal ingredients. Second would be to look at what you and your family are drinking to try and cut out sugar from drinks. And the third would be to take a close look at what's for breakfast.
Excellent and easy tips, as we would expect from you, with all that abundance of knowledge on how to turn sugar cravings around. Congratulations to you and Dr. Goran for publishing this incredible book, Sugarproof. And we really feel that it should be taught in every school, university, and offered to our patients free of charge as soon as they walk into our clinic. I think it would change a lot of lives and improve their health. If you are here on Zoom, do leave us a feedback in the chat box. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then do hit the subscribe button and share this video with your family, friends, and loved ones to help them live a longer and healthier life. Now, we are going to share the website, book, and Facebook and Instagram link to Sugarproof that you can check out in the comments or here in the Zoom chat just down below. To continue this conversation, become an ATWD member to join the supportive community, helping you implement the healthiest lifestyle choices that will help you to live a long and fulfilling life, completely free of charge. Our links are just in the comments below. Thank you once again, Emily, for joining us today, and to our guests for listening. And we are just going to have another 30 minutes with you in private on Zoom. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.